When we look at a portrait, we usually think it shows what a person actually looked like. But some were created for a completely different purpose, not to record the truth, but to make people believe something. This portrait of Napoleon, painted by Ingres, is a perfect example. Every detail was carefully designed to build an image of power, and this strategy has been around from ancient times to today in national symbols, portraits of leaders, and monuments standing in our streets. So let's take this painting apart and see how power gets made. Sitting on his throne, he stares straight ahead without the slightest hint of emotion. The round golden ornament on the throne looks just like a halo. He looks dignified, almost untouchable. This kind of frontal pose had long been used to portray gods, saints, and absolute rulers. Its roots go all the way back to the statue of Zeus in ancient Greece. Ingres borrowed that same imagery for Napoleon, presenting him not as an ordinary man, but as something almost godlike. Now let's move up to his head. Instead of a crown, he wears a laurel wreath, and if you look a little lower, you'll spot eagles on his necklace, on his throne, even on the carpet. In ancient Rome, emperors wore laurel wreaths and marched under the eagle. Napoleon borrowed these symbols to craft his own imperial image. But if you look at his hands, the story shifts again. In his right hand, he holds Charlemagne's scepter. In his left, the hand of justice, a symbol of royal power and authority. Both were ceremonial objects actually used in the coronations of French kings. The white ermine fur draped over him tells the same story. And finally, the most subtle detail, the golden bees on his robe. Napoleon chose the bee as a symbol of his empire, but its roots go back much further, to the Merovingian dynasty, France's first royal house. In this painting, Napoleon is surrounded by three towering symbols of power: God, Rome, and the French monarchy. Napoleon was a child of the Revolution, yet as emperor, he embraced royal imagery like no one before him. Actually, when this painting was first shown, critics tore it apart. They called it too stiff and unnatural. But take a look at this. Another portrait of Napoleon by Gerard. This one became the official image of the emperor. Same person, same era, similar style. The response couldn't have been more different. Back then, people were used to seeing Napoleon as a heroic conqueror, leading his armies into battle. Gerard gave people the Napoleon they expected. But Ingres painted him like a sacred image. So why did Napoleon need all these symbols? And why did Ingres portray him as something almost divine? The answer was legitimacy. It was Napoleon's biggest weakness. Napoleon wasn't born into a royal family. He was a soldier who rose to fame during the French Revolution and eventually seized power through a coup. People started to question whether he had the right to be emperor. He needed a new kind of legitimacy, something to replace bloodline. And that's where images and symbols came in. One of the best examples is the Coronation of Napoleon, painted by Jacques-Louis. The ceremony took place at Notre Dame Cathedral, staged on a massive scale to show off Napoleon's power. At first glance, it may look like a simple record of history, but the truth is, the scene was carefully constructed. Let's take a closer look at Napoleon. Standing in a beam of light, Napoleon is larger than life and more imposing than ever. Wearing a laurel wreath, he's about to crown his wife, Josephine. But that's not what actually happened at the coronation. Before the Pope could crown him, Napoleon took the crown himself and placed it on his own head. It was a statement. His power came from himself, not the church. Behind him sits Pope Pius VII. He looks calm and gentle, his fingers raised in a peaceful blessing. But in reality, he was reportedly stunned by Napoleon's unexpected move. In the balcony above, she is Letizia, Napoleon's mother. She never approved of Josephine, 6 years older than Napoleon and already a widow with 2 children. In fact, Letizia didn't even attend the coronation, but he still included her in the painting. David reshaped reality to create the image of a legitimate emperor supported by the church and his family. Ingres, on the other hand, used sacred imagery to make his authority seem beyond human. Different approaches, but the same goal: making people believe Napoleon was the rightful emperor. But this isn't just Napoleon's story. Centuries earlier, Augustus, the first emperor of Rome, had the same challenge. He wasn't born into a royal family. He was simply Caesar's adopted heir, chosen through his will. He borrowed from classical Greek sculpture. Just compare the Augustus of Prima Porta with the Doryphoros. The resemblance is striking. The ideal proportions, the balanced stance that feels both dynamic and stable, all of it matched exactly what Augustus wanted to project, a ruler who was powerful but calm and controlled. And although he was already middle-aged, he was portrayed with the face of a young man, completing the image of the perfect ruler. On top of that, he also borrowed the idea of divine lineage. At his feet, you can see Cupid, the son of Venus, and Venus had another son too, Aeneas, the Trojan hero. Romans believed Aeneas was their ancestor, and both Julius Caesar and Augustus claimed to be his descendants. So Cupid wasn't just a small detail, it suggested Augustus carried divine blood. Centuries later, the same strategy was still being used. Hitler borrowed symbols from Germanic mythology and the Roman Empire. Stalin turned to massive portraits and monuments to cast himself as the living symbol of the revolution. Let's come back to this painting. A painting that was once dismissed is now seen in a completely different light. Today, we don't ask whether it's a good portrait. Instead, it leaves us with a bigger question. How does power justify itself through image? The next time you see a leader's portrait, a monument, or even a national symbol, ask yourself, what is that image trying to prove? That's all for today. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.